Intersection Magazine Podcast.
Welcome to Intersection Magazine Podcast. A few weeks ago, I started a review of programs that were done, or podcasts that were done or featured by the BBC covering startups. The plan was to compare content in terms of the approach that this world-based organization is using to cover the startups and see what I can learn, what we can learn, and maybe see if there are any similarities in terms of trends that I've observed in this space, having attempted to talk about the innovation and technology ecosystem in the country and the region and the world. As you may have already seen, I have attempted to use the Silicon Valley model, where I've broken down the ecosystem and what I think are important components, and then use that across all the countries that I have focused on, primarily, of course, the big four, and then Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania, the countries that I've visited, to see how much we can learn and which different countries are doing the best, or in a sense matching the effectiveness of the Silicon Valley model. If you've also interacted with our podcast, you've come across our piece on Balaji Srinivasan on what he suggests is a trend of the future where the locus or the center of gravity might be shifting away from Silicon Valley for reasons which he has mentioned. So anyhow, the purpose of this, a second look of a piece that was put together by the BBC, is to examine the Silicon Valley of the Caucasus, as Armenia is described. And this is a piece by Rehan Dimitri of the BBC. So once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. I hope you can continue to subscribe, and I hope you enjoy what we've put together for you. Your host, Nicholas Kanda, for Intersection Magazine Podcast. Let's get into it. So the first thing that Rehan Dimitri sought to do in describing Armenia, which in this episode she refers to as the Silicon Valley of the Caucasus, was to describe the geography and give you a bit of context in terms of where Armenia is located, what are the challenges Armenia has been facing, and then what Armenia is doing to set itself up as a powerhouse, focusing primarily on technology and education. So Armenia is a landlocked country. It has had quite a number of challenges. I suppose location-wise, it's located Turkey on the west and Azerbaijan on the east, has had a long-lasting conflict with Azerbaijan, which we understand now some efforts are being made to solve. Its border with Turkey has been shut for a while. They've faced some economic challenges. Incidentally, they have a population of about 2.7 million. They have, you could describe it as an over-dependence on Russia for resources. The connection with Russia is historical. But also, of course, there's been benefits of the fact that the Russians understand the language, and there's quite a lot of cultural similarities. So they've been able to continue, in a sense, an on and off relationship with Russia. Now, ever since the invasion of Ukraine, there may have been a few rifts that have been established in that relationship. But one of the positives has been that there's been an influx of refugees from Ukraine, or people from Ukraine. So talent from Russia has flooded the Armenian market, which you will see in this episode. has been one of the benefits that has been observed. So what you currently have is, the plan is to have a tech center and a powerhouse delivering value both to Armenia and to the world. For example, you have a classroom. I'll describe a classroom with a 9-year-old girl that's creating smart devices using basically coding and 3D printers. So you have a combination of what is sometimes referred to as the Internet of Things, yes, but also this maker spaces that some of these are popular in places like the United States. So this young girl that I talked about has an example of an application that she created, which solves a problem which she observed, which is the lack of parking spaces in the city. And what this system lets you do is, from your home, you can find parking spaces and book them. So by the time you come into the city, you are able to find a space. There's another one over an 11-year-old boy who has put together a device on the roof of his mom's house. When it detects rain, it pulls together the clothesline so that the clothes are pulled out so that they don't get wet. So this is a smart home device. So the reason why some of those technologies or systems are in place is because of what they call Armath schools, which are like maker spaces in public schools. I wanted to give a bit of an example in terms of the skilling that's taking place in these environments. One of the children that was interviewed by Rehan Dimitri talked about, for example, having skills in Python, Arduino, C++, Scratch, and Turtle. If you've been a bit in the technology and coding space, you may have come across some of these technologies or some of these software tools that are used by the prominent people in the space. And these are quite, to be frank, not easy languages to learn, but that gives you a rough idea. Some of the rapid absorption of learning that's taking place in these centers. So there's a teacher, for example, who was herself part of the Armath system for 4 years that is now teaching. There's also a young man who has a memory game that he's created that has LED lights and helps you identify patterns. I can see how this can be used for older people, maybe to boost their memory, or people who are losing their memory for all sorts of reasons. So there's a combination of robotics. Another one has a temperature control application that turns on the fans automatically. So the variety of all sorts of projects that these young people are getting involved in. So the Armath lab is part of what they call the United, the Union of Advanced Technology Enterprises. And it's about 400, currently I suppose you have about 400 tech companies that what they characterize them is, they fall under about three verticals. So this is the perspective of the person in charge of the Armath labs. So he says it's basically about three basic verticals. You have got startups or sourcing companies that are multinational. Then you have a division of those companies based on the tech stack, whether that means it's a Web3 or AI or web tech. And then the third division is where, in terms of industry, is it a fintech, is it an agri-tech, is it a health tech? So this is how they split up all the tech companies that exist in Armenia. So Armath actually means Armenian mathematics, but also in terms of the Armenian language, it's the word for that means root. So the person who's in charge of the Armath labs currently grew up in a household where his father was building technology. He was a radio technologist. And he was wondering what he could do to scale. How could you scale what his father was doing in private? So when he met the team at Armath that was already doing some of what they were doing, he realized that this thing could actually scale. So if you want to describe what Armath does, it's actually a public-private partnership. And how this works is they raise capital from private companies. Then they go to schools and they give them the equipment. And then the government, through the Ministry of Education, funds, provides about 2 million USD to cover the costs of trainers and coaches, who are currently, I think, about 600 trainers and coaches, and with a coverage of about 17,000 active students. And about, I think it's about 9,000 alumni, if I'm not wrong. And the goal is to have the most talented students graduate and become engineers. So I think the goal is to have about 5,000 of those graduate. Now, in terms of growth, this system of Armath Labs has been replicated in Kuwait, Bangladesh, India, France, Germany, and the US. So if you want to look at those countries in terms of development, it's both third world and first world that are adopting a system that was created in Armenia. So if you want to think of it in terms of effectiveness, this is definitely a plus. So what is it doing? It's basically building, but it's also educating and expanding the scope of startups. There's another lady who was consulted. I think she has a program or a software that helps, that serves as a health marketplace. If you talk about her history, she started off in architecture, and then she realized when she transitioned into technology that applications can be used to solve quite a number of challenges, complex challenges. So she made the transition and went into applications and into the startup world. Now, in terms of the effectiveness of her company, there have been about two challenges. The first has been the post-war challenges between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The second was the COVID outbreak and the aftermath. So many things changed. After the COVID outbreak and the aftermath and the changes that took place after that, there's been an increase in terms of people or doctors enlisting for the use of her service. The service operates on a subscription model, so doctors pay to be listed. They've had about 25% revenue growth. They're looking into Central Asia, of course, with its population. Most of the work they do is, they realize, thinking of their country might be a bit of a limitation, hence the desire to expand. That's another thing that I've noticed is when you have challenges on a local level, this forces you to think sometimes internationally, which is what they've done, hence the expansion. That's one thing. The other thing that they talked about, or that the Armenians have done, is they have a company called SmartGate VC, operating mainly artificial intelligence and biotech. And what they realized is quite a number of Armenians in the diaspora were contributing to the growth of the ecosystem in terms of talent. So they said, let's get our founders, whether they're those founders that are in Armenia, let's take them to Silicon Valley, let's set up meetings with companies, let's set up meetings with VC firms, let's set up a startup academy where we can train the startup founders, give them the skills they need, open them up to opportunities. So in terms of how effective they've been, you can talk about how there's been a collective raise of about 55 million USD from companies that have had some connection with Armenia. One of the other things that I've noticed that's a bit of a similarity with Argentina, which we shared last time, was this: they've been striving to link scientists with business opportunities, especially scientists with postdocs and PhDs and those kinds of things. That's another interesting strategy. You've got people who are technically adept but don't have necessarily business skills, whose solutions can work. We talked about successful exits for, for example, companies like Yandex and Miro, and the advantages that, as we mentioned before, Armenia has attracting Russian talent. Although in terms of criticism, the tax regime may still need quite a lot of work. So people that were interviewed, founders that were interviewed, maybe those that are based in Russia or coming from Russia, talked about a challenge of expense especially for technology companies. So this is a place in which I suppose the government and the ministry that's in charge of this particular area can contribute in a sense similar to what Silicon Valley did, or the ecosystem in the US did, by introducing places like Delaware where companies can set up and have benefits that are business friendly. The population, as we mentioned before, of the Russian community, I think ranges from between 5,000 and 8,000, and this has helped attract more talent. Also, incidentally, there was a conference held in 2022, which was also responsible for the growth in numbers and the attraction of talent from places like Russia. So, apart from the establishment of very strong technical and educational centers in early stage development in schools through education, also the support of startups, and the encouragement and the direction of training towards young engineers, as well as, of course, the connection with Silicon Valley, and by taking young founders there to interact with companies and as well as venture capital firms. Those are about three different areas that I think have made Armenia unique. Maybe something else I could add is I talked about the fact that Armenia is landlocked. Now, in Uganda, one of the things I found out maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even more, is in Uganda a long time ago, the ministry and the ministers here, some of our minds here decided to stop thinking of Uganda as landlocked, because that seemed, in a sense, to be seen as a disadvantage. But now Uganda is referred to as land connected. So instead of thinking that we don't have access to the sea, Uganda is thinking of itself as having access or connection to quite a number of other countries, and you can see the benefits in trade, for example, with South Sudan, the Congo, as well as other countries like Rwanda, suppose, in Kenya. So, that shift also needs to be taken in view, which will help create a new way to think about the challenges. So that's it from my understanding of the BBC's coverage of the Silicon Valley, the Caucasus, as Armenia was referred to. The piece was put together by Rehan Dimitri, and it's a business daily program put together by the BBC, but we've tried to summarize some of the content that was presented in that episode for lessons that we can learn for our ecosystem in this region. I've been your host, Nicholas Kianda. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. We look forward to getting you more content. So this is the second piece from our summary of startups as presented by the BBC. Thank you for listening.
Intersection Magazine Podcast.